Hey folks, it's Justin Nation here with Nindie Spotlight, and I'm here to review for you the PDP Faceoff Wireless Deluxe controller, in this case the blue camo version, and it will be released on October 29th. So if you're watching it immediately once it gets posted, it's a slight preview. So this will give you an idea of what you are in store for if you're interested. If you're looking for a reasonable replacement for the Pro controller, just putting one next to it so you can see them sort of next to each other. Pretty much identical in terms of the placement and size of all the face buttons. The shoulder buttons are also pretty much identical to one another. There are differences, which I'll cover for you. The differences being that there is no rumble support. So if rumble is a big concern of yours, that'll be a deal breaker. There's no NFC support, so you can't use Amiibo with it, though that's pretty much, I think all third-party controllers don't have that. And honestly, I'm not an Amiibo guy at all, so I can't say I've ever used anything to do with Amiibo or the NFC support. This has a stated 30-foot wireless range. In terms of range, I couldn't see any noticeable difference between the Pro controller and this. About the same in terms of the battery life. It has a claimed 40-hour battery life. I was able to use this as my controller for multiple gaming sessions across many hours. Charge never really came up. So I'd say that seems to be a reasonably good claim, and that the battery life is at least comparable with the Nintendo's own Pro controller. So where it deviates a bit, but the one thing it does have comparable to the Nintendo Switch's controller, it does have a motion control. So the gyro is included. That's not in tons of games, but for those that have it, I really couldn't notice any differentiating factor in the way that the tilt controls worked. Seemed to be pretty much identical as far as I could tell. If you saw the review a little while ago on the Afterglow wireless controller, this is pretty much exactly the same. Has that nice sort of heft to it. If anything, this might be a little bit heavier than the Afterglow wireless controller, which it's not heavy, but for me, heft is always nice. For a device like this, it feels like it's going to be more durable and stand up to a little bit more rigorous use. When things get a little too light, they start to feel cheap, and sort of in an annoying way. This feels, I think the weight is probably almost identical to the Pro controller. Can't say I've noticed any real difference. They're about the same. If you have any Faceoff controllers, the wired ones that they had, the one thing that's a differentiating factor for these is that using the one switch on here, you have to sort of have both hands. You are able to remove, so I'd be able to remove this entire camo blue faceplate. And they do have other faceplates that you're able to buy, whether they are Mario, Luigi, Waluigi, Wario. They've got some Zelda ones. They've got I think a Yoshi one. They've got quite a few. So that is one thing that's nice if you wanted to personalize a bunch of controllers for your grandkids or your kids, or for you. This would be a convenient way of doing that. You just get a couple of the faceplates, pop this one off, and replace them, and you could have personalized controllers for everybody, or you could just get different colors of the camo, and that's good enough, and you'd be happy. One thing that's interesting about this that is, I would say it's a bonus, and a thing where it differentiates itself well from the Pro controller, is in terms of the texture. The Pro controller itself, and this is after, this thing is, I've had this since launch day, so I've worn it down a bit. Some of the matte finish is sort of started or the more glossy finishes started to wear. But it's a very smooth. Everything's very smooth. I wouldn't say it's slippery, but it is a smooth texture. The one thing that's nice about this controller is on both the back and at least the front faceplate. So if I replace the faceplate, it's going to be smooth. All those faceplates are smooth. But at least if you go with the default, there's actually a nice, very minor, sort of, I guess I'd call it a micro texture to everything. The back, the front. And I guess some people might find it annoying, perhaps. But actually, I think that it's a good design feature in terms of, yeah, if you had sweaty hands or whatever, it actually improves the gripability. It just, once you are sort of gripped on, it doesn't budge at all. Not to say that my Pro controller does, but I'm just in principle, that little difference I think is actually pretty helpful. So that was a sort of a smart design feature. Another place where it's a little different, where you see some gripability added, the analog sticks. If you look at the Pro Controller analog stick, if you can make it out, there's very little differentiation from the middle to the outside. They're roughly the same. There is a small sort of mini ridge around the center circle to the outer part, but in the case of the this controller, the Faceoff controller, there is a much more noticeable ridge. And at first I was actually a bit concerned about this. I was afraid that it would sort of be a problem for developing a callus or something like that. Not that I have a problem with calluses as much as I've played games, but it's not just that there's a ridge. There's also texturing sort of on the outer rim here, and I actually found that it seems to be a good design because even when I'm not centered at all, if I'm sort of out on the edge, which isn't the way you're going to play, but the ridges actually sort of lock into your thumbprint, so it does do a good job of sort of holding on. So I guess if you're playing a really intense game and you're sort of shifting around, it might be actually slightly better because your thumb's going to sort of stick to the middle, or it's going to be easier to sort of find purchase to get a good grip, so you can continue playing and sort of don't lose track. Just a minor difference. It probably is done in order to avoid Nintendo trying to sue them for infringing on their patent. But if you're going to do something, might as well improve it. So at a minimum, I like the effort that was put into making the analog sticks on this at least a little bit more helpful. Another place where there is an argument to be made that there's an improvement is with the D-pad. The D-pad on the Pro Controller is sort of notoriously a little bit wonky, a little bit unreliable if you're using it intensely in certain games. Fighting games perhaps would be a good place, but Tetris is usually a better gauge because of the fact that you want very precise response on Tetris as you move. And on the Switch Pro Controller, there's definitely some confusion at times, which can be very frustrating in a game like Tetris. Comparing them, I wouldn't say that my experience with the PDP, the D-pad on this is flawless. As I said in another review, I think what you'd need to do in order to sort of get a good control and assess that properly would be to actually have a physical D-pad. You'd have to have a SNES controller or a NES controller and sort of try to replicate all the same kind of thing to evaluate it. But at least compared to back-to-back playing with the Pro Controller and playing with this one, I would say my experience with this one was at least slightly better. It certainly is no less reliable than the D-pad from the Pro Controller. I'd argue that it feels like it's a bit more reliable. So, if you're a big fan of retro games or have had frustrations with the Pro Controller or just have been scared away by the reputation the D-pad has, this might be a good alternative choice if you're willing to make the sacrifices of the rumble and NFC and things like that. One thing I've seen people complain about is the connecting it to the switch initially. Um, I would say that when I used the Afterglow wireless controller, I had the same sort of experience. I thought it would be connected like the Pro controller was, and I was wrong. So I went down the wrong path of assumption, and that sort of created frustrations needlessly. Um, I would say the best thing to do is just follow the instructions that they include. They're very clear, and connecting is very simple. If you just follow their instructions, the only reason people tend to get, I think, frustrated is because they assume they know how to do it. And there are multiple ways to connect. Over the time, having connected multiple controllers, everybody has their own preferred method. It's best just to read the instructions and then not have any issue. The other issue that I've read, which is a valid complaint, is though the Pro controller can be used itself with a PC, you're able to connect it wirelessly or through a wire. And if you're using Steam in particular, Steam has sort of beta support still. I think they call it beta still of the Switch Pro controller. You are able to connect with the PC. It will recognize it. It recognizes it as it's supposed to be a Switch controller, though the name in the hardware is different. I don't remember what it is, and it isn't PDP, but it is something. It gives it a name if you look in the device list. The problem is that though it connects, it doesn't work, and it's a net negative because it sort of makes everything go screwy. You have to sort of tell it to stop trying to find it, or you have to turn off the controller's connection in order to make sort of the wonkiness stop, because it'll make your mouse go screwy and things like that. So it does connect, but it is not usable. I would think that hopefully that's something that PDP could choose to fix, though I don't know if it's on their radar. I don't know if enough people demand it to force them to sort of figure it out, or I don't know if it's an issue somehow with something that is beyond their control. I don't know what the deal is in terms of why it doesn't work and why the Pro controller does. But so if you're looking for PC connectivity, that's not going to be something that this is going to be good for. So you've been warned. The only last thing I can think of, it's an older USB connection, and if it's like it comes with a wire or a cord for charging. The one thing I would say is you want to keep track of that specific cord. There's just something about it's sort of a blocky the plastic, and you see this like a big rectangular hole. In my experience, you want to have the right charging cable for this, because I've not been able to use a comparable USB cable, the same type, but it's not, made exactly the same way. I've had issues not using the USB cable that's provided. So, it might just be the cables that I have that are problematic. You might have no problem at all. But I would, just as a warning, keep very careful track of the cable that it comes with, because that's the guaranteed way you're going to be able to use it to charge without a problem when you need to do it periodically. But all in all, as far as comparing to the Pro controller, if you're willing to make the concessions, no rumble, no NFC, things like that, and you want to save some money because it is a bit cheaper than the Pro controller, it is a very viable and useful controller. Really only matched by their little wireless controller, which I just evaluated, different form factor. So form factor is going to come into it in that case. But I'd say compared to even the wireless Afterglow controller, I think that the small texture and just little things like that, I think I prefer this. If I had to, choose between them, I think this is the better option. Certainly, if you, like having a little light show in your hands, you're going to want the Afterglow. But Obviously, this, if you like the face plates the Faceoff controllers offer, then this would be preferable. So it all comes down to taste, but I think, like I said, comparing the two, I think I would prefer this one. Um, and hopefully that is a helpful summary of everything I've found. And thank you for listening, and I'll talk to you later.